Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for the Applying for Financial Aid 2022-2023 FAFSA walkthrough. The goal of our Applying for Financial Aid video series is to take some of the mystery out of the financial aid process. Check our website at jjc.edu/financial aid for a link to our other financial aid help videos. During this walkthrough, we will go through the steps for a dependent student. However, the process is very similar for an independent student. The major difference between the two is that a student who is considered independent will not be required to complete the parent portions of the FAFSA application. My name is Deanna, and I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Joliet Junior College. The intended audience for this video is any student or parent who is looking for information on completing the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. If you've never completed a FAFSA before, these screenshots will give you an understanding of what to expect on the application. This is a lengthy presentation since we are going through each screen of the FAFSA. If you are stuck on a particular section of your FAFSA, I suggest skipping ahead on the video. I've put headings on each slide to correspond with where we are on the FAFSA process. So for example, if you are working on the parent financials section of your FAFSA, skip ahead in the video to look for parent financials in the top title portion of the slide. Before we dive in, just a few general tips. 1. The navigation tabs at the top of the page tell you which step of the process that you are on and whose information that they are requesting, student or parent. 2. The FAFSA saves itself often, as noted in the green box. 3. The FAFSA also reminds you that this is the student's application for financial aid, and any time that you see requests for information noted by you or your, such as your name or your tax filing status, this is asking for the student's information. 4. The help buttons on each field indicated by the question mark in the circle are extremely helpful if you get stuck on a question. 5. The FAFSA uses skip logic, which means depending on how you answer a question, it may trigger another question to appear or hide. So you may not be asked all of the questions that appear in this walkthrough, and your FAFSA experience may not be the same as another student's. Let's get started at studentaid.gov. On the studentaid.gov homepage, you will navigate to the Apply for Aid menu and then select Complete the FAFSA form. On the FAFSA page, you will see the option to log in as a new user or as a returning user. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be logging in as a new user. The next screen asks who is the person logging in, the student, a parent of the student, or a preparer, which is more rare. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be choosing I am the student. The student will then be prompted to log in with their FSA ID username and password to continue. If you have not yet created your FSA ID, you can do so at fsaid.ed.gov or by clicking the link on this page. You can view our website at jjc.edu/financial aid for help videos on how to create your FSA ID or if you've forgotten your username or password. The student may also choose to continue without an FSA ID by selecting Use Personal Identifiers. For the purposes of this walkthrough, the student will be entering their FSA ID username and password to log in. You will then be presented with a disclaimer. Please read it and then click Accept to move forward. On the My FAFSA page, you will be asked to select which FAFSA year that you are applying for. If you are planning to attend college August 2022 to May 2023, select the 2022-23 FAFSA. You will use 2020 income and tax information to complete this FAFSA. If you are planning to attend college August 2021 to May 2022, select the 2021-22 FAFSA. You will use 2019 income and tax info to complete that FAFSA. If you will be attending college in both years, be sure to complete both FAFSAs. If you are attending school in a summer semester, typically May through August, contact your college to determine which FAFSA they need you to complete. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be selecting the 2022-2023 FAFSA. The student will then be prompted to enter a save key. The save key allows an applicant to save their FAFSA form and return at a later time to the same section or same page to complete and submit it. The save key also provides applicants an easy way to share access to their FAFSA form to their parents if their parents need to add information or sign it on a certain page. You will then be brought to an introduction screen with some frequently asked questions. Each topic has accordion functionality that can be expanded or closed to reveal or conceal additional information. So you'll see we've now entered the FAFSA and we are on the first student demographics screen. This screen asks for students' social security number, name, and date of birth. The second student demographics screen asks for students' email address and telephone number. While not mandatory, it is beneficial for the applicant to include an email address on the FAFSA in order to receive important communications about their financial aid. The third student demographics screen asks for the student's permanent mailing address. The fourth student demographics screen asks for the student's residency and eligibility information. In the U.S. citizen drop-down box, if the student selects eligible non-citizen, then they will be prompted to enter their alien registration number. If the student is neither a citizen nor an eligible non-citizen, such as a student who is a DACA student or an international student, they are not eligible for federal student aid. In this case, if the student is an Illinois resident, we would suggest that they complete the alternative application for Illinois financial aid at isac.org. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will select yes, I am a United States citizen. The fifth student demographics screen asks what the student's high school completion status will be when they begin college in the 2022-23 academic year, such as high school diploma, GED, or homeschooled. Then answer what college degree the student will be working on when they start, such as bachelor's degree, associate's degree, or certificate. Answer yes or no to if the student will have their first college bachelor's degree when they begin the academic year. And then indicate what level of college the student will be in during that academic year, such as first year, second year, graduate student, etc. And note that this is asking for the college grade level, not high school. We have many students who answer this incorrectly and put that they're a senior in high school. This is asking for college grade level. Lastly, indicate whether or not the student is interested in work study. Work study is a program where students can get a student worker job at their college. The sixth student demographic screen asks if the student is male or female. If male, you will be prompted with additional questions about registering with the Selective Service System. The answer to the Selective Service question will not impact the applicant's eligibility to receive federal student aid. The seventh student demographic screen asks for the student's driver's license information if they have one. And then the final student demographic screen asks if the student is a foster youth or was ever in the foster care system. And then finally, answer what the highest level of schooling each of the student's parents has achieved. If you are unsure, there is a other/unknown option in the drop-down menu. So now you'll notice that we've moved on to the next section of the application, school selection. On the first school selection page, enter the name, city, and state of the high school where the student received or will receive their high school diploma, and then click search. Note, you will only see this screen if you indicated on the student demographics screen that your high school completion status is high school diploma. You will not see this screen if you indicated that you were homeschooled or received a GED certificate. Once you click search, the second school selection page will appear, prompting you to select the correct high school that you attended. Once selected, the student will then be prompted to confirm their high school information, and you can also start a new search if needed. The next school selection page is where you select up to 10 colleges to send the student's FAFSA information to. If the student is unsure what college they will be attending, continue completing the FAFSA anyway. You can always come back to your FAFSA and add or change school codes. It's always a good idea to add your local community college to your FAFSA just in case your plans unexpectedly change. If you already know your school's federal school code, select the Search by Federal School Code tab and enter the code. Joliet Junior College's code is 001699. If you do not know your school's federal school code, use the Search by School Name, City, and State tab instead. Enter those identifiers and then click Search. The search results will appear. Select the correct college by checking the box next to it and then continue. Once the student has selected the schools, and again, you can select up to 10 colleges, they will then be prompted to select a housing plan for each school. Select if the student will be living on campus, with parent, or off campus. You can also choose to add more schools from this screen. Once you have added all of the colleges that you want your FAFSA information sent to, click Continue. Notice that we have now moved on to the Dependency Status tab of the application. The FAFSA uses this series of questions to determine if the student is considered dependent or independent for the purposes of the FAFSA. Use the drop-down menu to select what the student's marital status is as of the day you are completing the FAFSA. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are focusing on a dependent student, so we will indicate that the student is single. The next page will ask questions to report if the student has any children of their own or qualifying other dependents. Note that both questions indicate that the student must provide more than half of the support through the entire academic year to qualify as having a dependent of their own. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are focusing on a dependent student, so we will select that the student does not have any children of their own or any qualifying other dependents. This page asks additional dependency questions, such as, are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? The student should check mark if any of the situations apply, or select none of the above. Don't forget to use the Help button if you ever want to read more about a question. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are focusing on a dependent student, so we will select that none of the above apply to the student. Indicate here if the student is homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. If yes is selected, there will be an additional series of questions about the homeless status. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be selecting no. In our scenario, the FAFSA has now determined that the student is considered a dependent student and will need to enter their parents' demographic and parent financial information next. Had the student been considered independent based on the FAFSA questions, they would have been able to skip the parent sections and move on to student financial section instead. It's important to note that if you are self sufficient and living on your own, that does not automatically make you independent for the purposes of the FAFSA. Parental data is required for dependent students. Select here if you will be providing parental data. If the student is unable to provide parental data due to special circumstances, such as the parent is deceased, incarcerated, or the student no longer lives with them due to neglect, abandonment, or a documented history of abuse, then select that you are unable to provide information about your parents. That will bring up a series of informational screens about what to do if you are submitting your FAFSA without parental data, and you will need to contact your college's financial aid office for their next steps. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be selecting I will provide information about my parents. Notice now that we've moved on to the Parent Demographics tab. This screen will help the student know whose parental information they must enter on the FAFSA. Use the arrows to read more about each section and then click Continue. If your parents live together, regardless of their marital status, you will be providing information on both parents. If your parents are divorced or separated, then you will be providing information on the parent that you lived with the most over the past 12 months. If that parent is also remarried, you will be providing info on the new spouse as well. You'll notice the star on this last one. If you lived with both of your parents equally over the past 12 months, you'll provide information on the parent who provided more financial support during that time or during the most recent year that you actually received support from a parent. If your parent is widowed, you will be providing information on your surviving parent. And if that parent is remarried, you will also be required to provide info on the new spouse. If you were legally adopted, then you will provide information about the person or people who adopted you. Now that you've determined whose parental information that you need to provide, use the drop-down menu to select what the parent's marital status is as of the day you are completing the FAFSA. Depending on what is selected from the drop-down menu, additional questions may appear, such as the date of marriage or date of divorce. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be selecting that the parents are married or remarried. So back on the parent demographics screen, the student will then be prompted to enter their first parent's social security number, name, date of birth, and email address. It's important to note that the immigration status of a dependent student's parents does not affect the student's financial aid eligibility. So if your parent does not have a valid social security number, you will enter all zeros as their social security number. Do not enter their IRS ITIN number. Next, you will be prompted to enter the second parent's social security number, name, and date of birth. Depending on the answer to your parent marital status question on a previous screen, you may or may not be prompted to enter information on both parents. The student will then answer this question about their parents' state of legal residence. The next screen asks for information about how many other dependent children that the student's parents have. An example of other dependent children could be if the student has a younger sibling that the parents also support. The screen also asks how many other dependents that the student's parents have. An example of other dependents could be if an elderly family member, such as a grandparent, resides in the same house and the parents financially support them. Those are just some examples, so be sure to read each of these definitions and criteria carefully and use the help buttons and the hyperlinks to get more info to be sure you are reporting accurate numbers. This screen then uses the information you entered on the previous screen to calculate the household size. Review the household size for accuracy and use the previous button if you need to make changes. This next question asks, of the number of people in your household, who will be attending college during that same academic year? Read the instructions here carefully to know who to count in this number. Notice we have now moved on to the parent financials section. The financial sections are a great place to use the help buttons if you're not sure what they're asking for or where to find it on your IRS tax forms and W-2s. The first question asks whether or not your parents have already completed their IRS tax return. The second question asks what type of tax return they filed. And the third question is what their filing status was on the tax return. You will find all of these answers on their completed tax return. Pay close attention to which year's tax and income information they are requesting here to be sure you're looking at the correct documents. If your parents are eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you will see this Proceed to the IRS button. This is the easiest, most efficient, and accurate way to import your parents' tax information into the FAFSA, and we highly encourage your parents use the data retrieval tool if they are eligible. The process will take them to the IRS site and request some personal identifiers from them. Be sure to type in those identifiers exactly as they appear on the latest tax return, including any abbreviations that may be in their mailing address. Once they complete that step, they will be returned to the FAFSA site and all of the tax data will be imported automatically. If your parents are not eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see a message indicating that. There are several reasons that this can happen, such as if they were recently married or if they filed their tax return with the status of married filing separately. If they are not eligible to use the data retrieval tool, they will need to enter their tax and income information manually on the next couple of screens. This view will be displayed if the parent chooses not to use the IRS data retrieval tool on the previous page. An additional opportunity is presented to the parent to determine if they would like to link to the IRS for their financial information. If you click no thanks, then their parents will be prompted to enter their information manually. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are not using the data retrieval tool and we will discuss manual entry of each item. If the parent is either ineligible or decides not to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will be prompted to enter their financial information manually. This first screen asks you to enter the parent's adjusted gross income. Don't forget to look at the year that they are asking about so you know which tax form to look at. And the instructions here will tell you exactly which line to look up from their tax return. If your parents were able to use the data retrieval tool, they may see the text transferred from the IRS in this field and will not need to provide any additional information. And also remember that the FAFSA uses skip logic. So if your parents indicated on a previous screen that they did not file taxes, they may not see some of these financial questions. This next screen asks for how much each of your parents earned from working. Don't forget to look at which year that they are asking about and look at the instructions here to tell you exactly which lines to add up from their tax return. Your parent may or may not have some of these forms in their tax return. For example, not everyone is required to file a Schedule 1 or a Schedule K1, so they may not have an amount to add for those portions. If your parent did not earn anything from working in that particular year, enter 0 into these fields. The questions or instructional text that you see on this screen may vary as it is based upon responses to previous questions on the FAFSA. Your parent may or may not see the first question about filing a Schedule 1 with their tax return. They may also be asked if they are a dislocated worker and if they received any assistance from the list of federal benefit programs. Use the hyperlinks and the help buttons here for definitions and additional information when answering these questions. This screen asks how much your parents' income tax is. Don't forget to look at the year that they're asking about, and the instructions here tell you exactly what line to look at on the tax return to calculate this. If your parents were able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see the words tech transferred from the IRS in this field, and they will not need to provide additional information. This screen asks for more information about parents' income and tax information. Again, pay attention to the year that they're asking about in each line. Refer to the instructions on each line, as well as the help fields, to read more about this information. If they do not have an amount for any line, leave it as a zero. This screen again asks for more information about parents' income and tax information. As always, pay attention to the year that they're asking about and refer to the help buttons on each line if needed. And if they do not have anything, leave it as zero. This screen asks for information about parents' untaxed income. Again, pay attention to the year that they're asking about. Read each question carefully and refer to the help buttons on each field if you get stuck. If you do not have an amount for the item for the parents, leave it as zero. The last screen of the parent financial section asks for information about your parents' assets, such as cash, saving and checking account balances, net worth of investments, and net worth of their businesses or farms. Note that the questions here want amounts as of today, the day you're filling out the FAFSA, which is different than the previous screens, which all requested tax and income data from 2 years prior. So now that you've completed the parent financials section, you will be asked to provide the same type of information for the student. The first question, again, asks whether or not the student has already completed their IRS tax return for that year. The second question asks what type of tax return the student filed. And the third question asks what their filing status was on that tax return. You will find these answers on the student's completed tax return. Pay close attention to which tax year they are asking about so you make sure you're looking at the correct documents and forms. If the student worked and is eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you will see the Proceed to the IRS button. This is the easiest and most efficient and accurate way to import the student's tax information into the FAFSA, and we highly encourage the student uses the data retrieval tool if they are eligible to do so. The process will take them to the IRS site and it will be requested for some personal identifiers. Be sure to enter these identifiers exactly as they appear on the student's latest tax return, including any abbreviations that may be in their mailing address. Once they complete, they will be returned to the FAFSA site and all of their tax data will be imported automatically. If the student is not eligible to use the data retrieval tool, they will see a message indicating that. If they are not eligible, they will need to enter their tax and income information manually on the next couple of screens. This view is displayed when the student chooses not to use the IRS data retrieval tool from the previous page. An additional opportunity is presented to the student to determine if they would like to link to the IRS for their financial information, or they can click No Thanks to continue and enter it manually. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are not using the data retrieval tool and will discuss manual entry of each item. If the student has chosen not to use the data retrieval tool, or if they are ineligible to use it, they will be directed to enter this information manually. This first screen asks for the student's adjusted gross income. Don't forget to look at the correct year that they are asking for so that you refer to the correct tax document. And the instructions here will tell you exactly which lines to look at on the tax return. If the student was able to use the data retrieval tool, they will see the words transferred from the IRS in this field and will not need to provide any additional information. This screen asks for how much the student earned from working. Again, don't forget to look at the correct year they're asking about, and the instructions here tell you exactly which lines to add up from the tax return. The student may or may not have some of these forms in their tax return. For example, not everyone is required to file a Schedule 1 or a Schedule K1, so they may not have any amounts to add in for that portion. If the student did not earn anything from working in that particular year, enter 0. If the student was able to use the data retrieval tool, they will see transferred from the IRS in this field and will not need to provide additional information. And remember that the FAFSA uses skip logic. So if the student indicated on a previous screen that they did not file taxes, they may not see some of these financial questions. This screen asks for how much the student's income tax is. Don't forget to look at the correct year, and the instructions here tell you exactly which lines to look at on their tax return. If the student was able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see transferred from the IRS text in this field and will not need to provide additional information. This screen asks for more information about the student's income and tax information. Again, pay attention to which year they are asking about, refer to the instructions on each line, as well as the help button on each line to determine what they're asking for and where to find it on students' tax forms. If the student does not have any amount for any item, leave it as a 0. This screen asks for more information about the student's income and tax information. Again, pay attention to the year that they're asking about and refer to the help buttons if you get stuck. If the student does not have an amount for this item, leave it as 0. This screen asks for information about the student's untaxed income. Again, pay attention to which year they're asking about. Read each question carefully. Refer to the help buttons on each field if needed. If the student does not have an amount for an item, leave it as 0. The last screen of the student financial section asks for information about the student's assets, such as cash, saving and checking account balances, net worth of investments, and net worth of their businesses or farms. Note that the questions want amounts as of today, the day you are filling out the FAFSA, which is different than the previous screens, which all requested tax and income data from 2 years prior. I know those financial sections can be overwhelming, and the good news is that once you finally make it through them, you are almost at the end of the application. You see now that we've moved on to the Sign and Submit tab of the process. On the first screen of the Sign and Submit steps, the student is presented with a summary of all the FAFSA information that has been entered. These screenshots show just a portion of that information. You'll want to scroll through the summary and review everything for accuracy. If you find something that needs to be corrected, click on the hyperlink next to the item and it'll return you to that section of the FAFSA for you to make corrections. This is your opportunity to make sure everything is correct and avoid any processing delays down the line. Once you get to the bottom of the summary page, you'll also have a button to print this page if you choose to do so. The student's terms and conditions will appear next. Read and understand that what you are signing, as this is a federal application. Agree to the certification statement to move forward to electronically sign the FAFSA. If you were already logged in with your FSA ID, username, and password, then you will have now electronically signed your FAFSA. You will be brought to the signature status screen where you will now see the student status has been updated to signed with FSA ID. The parent will now need to sign. Click Provide Parent Signature. This screen allows you to choose which parent will be signing the application. Only one parent signature is required. If you can't remember who you listed as parent 1 and parent 2, refer to the Social Security number and birth date to help. This view will not display if you've only entered parent information for one parent earlier in the application. The parent's terms and conditions will appear. The parent should read and understand what they are signing as this is a federal application. The parent must agree to the certification statement to move forward. This screen will allow the parent to enter their own unique FSA ID username and password to electronically sign. If they do not have their own unique FSA ID username and password yet, they can create one from this page. Once they've entered in their ID username and password, they can sign this FAFSA form. Signing electronically is the fastest and easiest method. However, if the parent is unable to create their own FSA ID username and password to electronically sign, click on Other Options to sign and submit. If the parent clicks on Other Options to sign and submit, they will be presented with these three options. Again, they get the opportunity to sign electronically with an FSA ID. If they're unable to sign electronically, they can select Print a Signature Page. If they choose this one, they will need to print the signature page, sign it, and then mail it to the Department of Education. Do this as soon as possible as there are delays with the manual signature process. Your FAFSA will not be valid without signatures, so we do not recommend that you choose the Submit Without Signatures option as this can cause delays for you. For the purposes of this walkthrough, the parent chose to print a signature page to sign and mail, and now you will see the status of both signatures is completed. The final step is to click Submit My FAFSA Now button. Do not forget to submit the FAFSA, even if the parent did not sign electronically and you are mailing in a signature page. The final page is a confirmation page. Congratulations, your FAFSA has been submitted. This screen gives you some general ideas of what happens next. It is important to know that your school will not receive this information for a few business days, and even when they do, you may be required to submit additional documentation to the school before your financial aid can be awarded. So it's always important to apply for financial aid early. Be sure to watch for communication from your schools on the required documentation they may need. This screen will also give you the student's expected family contribution for the academic year. This is an amount calculated by the Department of Education based on the information submitted on the FAFSA. This is the number provided to colleges that they must use to determine what financial aid awards a student may be eligible for. So just a few helpful tips now that you've submitted your FAFSA. In a couple of business days, your FAFSA information will be available to the schools that you listed on your FAFSA. If you haven't already done so, make sure to complete an admissions application for each of those schools. Usually their admissions applications are found on their schools' websites. Watch for financial aid communication from each school, such as deadline dates, payment due dates, and requests for additional information. These communications are typically sent to your student email account from the school or the school's portal. These are not typically sent to personal email accounts. You may be selected for a process called verification, and this means that the school will be required to request additional forms from you before your financial aid can be completed. After all of your documents have been submitted to the school and reviewed by the school, each school will present you with a financial aid offer letter or award letter. When in doubt, contact your school's financial aid office. And don't forget, you have to redo the FAFSA every year on October 1st. If after this walkthrough you still need some additional assistance, here are some good resources to check out. studentaidhelp.ed.gov has information on their website as well as provide assistance via chat and email. You can also call them at 1-800-4FED-AID. This studentaid.gov website is also a great resource with steps to complete the FAFSA. If you need to, pause the video here so you can jot this down and bookmark it. Our website, jjc.edu/financial aid, has additional help videos for you to watch. You can also feel free to call or email us. For help on your FAFSA, we offer dates and times for financial aid application completion workshops. Visit our website for upcoming dates and to reserve your spot. We also offer in-person and virtual appointments with a financial aid advisor. You can call us to schedule an appointment. Before attending a completion night or an appointment with an advisor, be sure you've completed these couple steps. Create an FSA ID username and password for yourself and your parent if applicable. Complete and save as much of your FAFSA as possible by yourself and write down your remaining questions. And have copies of your income tax forms, W-2s, and any other asset and income information available as well. So that's the end of our presentation for today. Here's our contact information again. I want to thank you all for joining me. I know this was a long one. Hopefully you were able to skip ahead and get answers to some of your questions. And if you need additional help, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you and have a great day.